Hi, welcome to this part of my review featuring the Fading Suns Universe book. If you haven't seen the other parts of this review, please check out the playlist in the description below. Today we are going to continue with the history of the setting, the New Dark Ages. 10 triumphant noble houses soon gained the backing of the church, for they supported, for political purposes, the Republic's recognition of orthodoxy. They also officially accepted the tenet that humanity was sinful and that the church had righteous power over the lives of the sinful. The church moved quickly to stamp its doctrine on all it could. Its main tenet was that technology was evil. It had caused the downfall of humanity, so humans must not respect or practice it. That was the sin of technosis. The noble houses agreed, seeing a method by which their new populace could be kept in line. They, of course, sought an exception to the anti-technology creed. Both the nobility and the church finally came to a necessary agreement. The church needed some measure of tech for itself, but it also had to concede some to the houses. As a result, the nobility was conceived to be in a form of extreme penance, compelled to compassionately take on sinful tasks to save the common soul from such stain. Thus, the use of technology and the powers of rulership were seen as necessary evils, and nobles were martyrs seeking to save humanity from again staining itself. The church also claimed a saintly role in this, decreeing it to be the duty of priests to guard the commoners from tech. But this sharing of power between the two forces was not complete. The guildsmen who possessed what little technological knowledge remained made their bid for power. They formed the Merchant League from the remaining Republic senators and corporate heads, refusing to hand down their knowledge of technology. The houses began a reign of terror, hunting down and imprisoning anyone who claimed to be a guild member. The church began excommunicating the leaders of the league, forcing loyal priests to refuse succor for these outcasts. However, because of their technological advantages, the priests and nobility were forced to give the League a cut of the action. The result was the Triune government of the Dark Ages. This uneasy and fractured alliance often broke out into open conflict between the parties, causing much suffering among common humans and aliens. The 10 elected one among them as council leader, but these leaders always had enemies, and they rarely ruled for long. In addition, membership among the 10 was fluid. Houses rose and fell over the years, as only the strongest or craftiest maintained their positions for long. Into this fractious universe came the barbarians. Let's talk about the barbarian invasions. After the fall, the borders of human space shrank, leaving only the known worlds. Some worlds deliberately cut themselves off from jump travel by blocking their gates and attacking anyone who tried to enter their systems. Others lost their ability to reach space as civil wars destroyed starships and the factories to repair them. Most worlds were too busy to aid small backwater worlds. Certain worlds sealed their jump gates, cutting themselves off from the madness going on around them for an unknown amount of time. Those with the technical know-how and a detailed understanding of jump gates can seal a gate, that is, they can shut down all travel from one or more directions. Untold numbers of planets were cut off from humanity's central civilization, some to be rediscovered later, others to disappear from history forever. Who knows how many lost planets in the depths of space still support human life? In addition to the worlds of the Second Republic, worlds reached only by jump gate, there are presumably thousands of star systems without known jump gates, populated by unknown residents. Some of these stars, those nearest to Earth in light years, were the targets of First Republic slow ships in the distant past, but these generation ships were forgotten after the jump gates were discovered, and none of them have ever reached the known worlds. Indeed, few people in the Empire pay attention to stellar distances such as light years. Such details became unnecessary after the jump gates, as travel across vast distances became possible in the blink of an eye. In this environment of fractured roadways, Not all worlds were claimed by houses, church, or league. Many forgotten planets began independent governments of their own. Most of these governments remained hostile to their neighbors, fighting centuries-long feuds, and some looked upon the riches of the known worlds and lusted for them. A few leaders of such forlorn worlds who still had starships were able to form a coalition and raid the known worlds, targeting the worlds where they could sweep in, pillage, and escape before aid could arrive. The barbarians were no longer at the gate, they were through it and plundering. Delphi, House Hawkwood's homeworld, suffered the worst of these assaults. House Hawkwood was able to gather troops with the aid of its minor house allies. After a bloody battle, the Hawkwoods fended off assaults on their homeworld. However, it was no major military victory, for the bulk of the barbarian army had already left with its loot. The Ten knew that the raiders' success would soon cause more barbarians to break through their defenses, but their internal squabbling prevented them from forming a united front against the invaders. The barbarians, as expected, did return, and this time in greater numbers. The Boldrock Star Nations were a fractious alliance of different Lost Worlds cultures, now united in a campaign to lay claim to outlying worlds. They succeeded. A disunited, selfish nation cannot long survive such outside pressure. One person was needed to unite it and send its enemies running. Here is where Vladimir unites the stars. The problem of a united front against the barbarians was keenly felt by Vladimir Alecto, the recently elected leader of the Ten. Vladimir saw that the far-flung and fractured commonwealth of humanity would soon crumble before the might of its enemies, if someone did not act to bring the known worlds together. His primary aim, of course, was power. Pledging to lead the known worlds to victory and reclaim the embattled worlds, Vladimir began gathering allies. A military genius, he had a strong following among all the minor noble houses and 5 of the 10. After years of battle, the tide turned in Vladimir's favor. King Frolgir, later called the Ill-Fated, was killed on Gwyneth, breaking the power of his Boldrock alliance. His warriors were forced back to their own worlds. The jump roads connecting entry into the known worlds were often sealed or hidden to prevent future sorties. But Vladimir did not keep his promises in full. For those major houses who had not fully supported him, he claimed their worlds for himself. Civil war erupted. The Geyser, Windsors, Van Gelder, the Kados, and certain minor houses were turned against him, along with many sects and guilds. But the rest of the known worlds were behind him. The war was bloody. Years after it had begun, Vladimir accepted the surrender of the rebel houses and declared himself emperor. A great coronation ceremony was held on Byzantium Secundus when Vladimir arrived to take the throne. But as he placed the crown upon his head, fire erupted from his eyes and he fell dead to the floor. Years of hard-won victory ended in seconds. The assassin behind the deed has never been revealed. Even today, many whisper that demons were at work. Vladimir had no blood successor. A race was on to claim the throne after him. House Alecto, weak from the expenditure of its resources during Vladimir's campaigns, fell to the status of a minor house. The Geyser and Windsors also became extinct, too weak from their recent surrender to carry on. They had all lost too many sons and daughters to Vladimir's war, and soon lost those few who remained. The 10 became the 5. Hawkwood, the Kados, the Hazat, Lihalan, and Al-Malik. But the electors could come to no accord. Instead of an emperor, they elected a temporary regent to rule for 10 years until an emperor was chosen. Let's talk about the Symbiote Wars. The Second Republic had its share of secrets, and at least one of these came back to haunt the known worlds. Not all citizens of the Republic appreciated the massive terraforming program whereby all worlds were slowly transformed into human environments, Earth-like, especially with the subsequent upheaval of native alien races and the disappearance of unique flora and fauna. As a result, The Republic suffered its share of eco-activists and terrorists. One such cabal of eco-terrorists eked a precarious existence in the jungles of Chernobog, harassing the Second Republic terraforming engineers. After a particularly successful sabotage of machinery, they retreated into unexplored jungle to avoid the authorities' intensive search. There, they disturbed a previously unknown alien species. The Xolotl were awakened from hibernation and began parasitically infesting the humans in an attempt to breed. Two of the terrorists had occult powers, Psi and Thurgi, and the result was explosive. A new species of beings emerged, neither Xolotl or human, but something unique, a symbiote. Transformed in body and mind, infused with an almost instinctual hate for humans, the two quickly bred, creating symbiote progeny from their non-psychic fellows and from the plants and animals native to Chernobog. After gathering strength and practicing their newfound powers, they assaulted the human capital with fury. Unable to withstand or even comprehend the weaponry of the symbiotes, the Second Republic retreated from Chernobog and sealed the jump gate so that no one could get onto or off the contaminated world. The Republic then worked to hide news of the event from the citizenry. The last thing they wanted was an alien threat to cause more chaos. Nearly a millennium after the fall, the symbiotes returned. Sometime in the intervening years, they had attained jump capability in their organic ships, although even now, no human understands how this is possible. Unable at first to break through the sealed jump gate to Stigmata, the symbiotes had expanded out and away from the known worlds. It was only a matter of time until the symbiotes came back to their point of origin. A symbiote ship passed through the jump gate at Absolution and landed in an outlying city. Its crew began slaughtering the residents without warning. The symbiote's organic tech was astonishing: living ships, carapace battle armor, and even living guns. The very thought of these organic horrors repulsed the human defenders, even as they died fighting against them. The symbiotes did not capture the world, that was never their intent, but they left the resource extraction industry in shambles and the human population decimated. Daishan and Stigmata, other worlds on the borders of human space, became wary and ready for attack, but the symbiote forces did not arrive in fleets. They moved in mysterious ways, attacking through the most unexpected avenue. The very flora and fauna of the planets turned on the human colonists. The symbiotes had planned their assault for years, having finally broken the jump codes to these worlds earlier. They had secretly converted whole ecosystems under the very noses of the ignorant colonists. Humans found it hard to fight off whole forests or herds of predatory beasts working in teams to devour scout units. The humans, as expected, resorted to firebombing and eco-destruction to eliminate their opposition. But even this did not destroy the symbiotes. Their seeds lay deep in the organic structure of their chosen planets. The new growth over the charred forests strangely grew more quickly than it should have, this time stronger and more resilient to fire damage. The symbiote planet forces learned from their failures and grew defenses against them. It was clear that the symbiotes were masters of guerrilla warfare against a technologically superior force. While they could not immediately seize the worlds for themselves, they could ensure the humans a costly defense and an eventual rout. The Regent moved quickly to defend Stigmata, the system the symbiotes would have to pass through to reach the rest of the known worlds. The Imperial fleet was dispatched and the battles began. Things did not go well for the Imperial forces. While they had more advanced weaponry than the symbiotes, the parasites were tenacious. While the symbiotes made few advances, neither could they be easily beaten back. Finally, in one area, surprisingly and for no apparent reason, the tide was turned and the symbiote forces were pushed back. Upon investigation, it was discovered that two people were largely responsible: Friar Berthold of the then heretical Eschatonic Order and Damiana, a charioteer trader. These two were unusual in that they were both practicing occultists, Berthold was a theurgist, and Damiana a powerful psychic. They were residents of the planet before the symbiotes had arrived, joined together in a secret coven. They had gathered the other local residents together to mount a guerrilla defense against the symbiote invaders, a rebellion which went unnoticed by the Imperial fleet. The Friar's litanies and Damiana's sigh succeeded where military might could not. They had discovered the key to fighting the symbiotes on something close to even terms. However, psychic powers, once the high science of the Republic, were outlawed by the Church. Covert deals had to be made before occult powers would be accepted. Once all was agreed upon, the Church unleashed other Scatonic Order priests and rogue psychics, promised absolution for their service, onto Stigmata. They were contracted inquisitors, given the power to cleanse the corruption in any way they saw fit. It worked. Where science could not clean out the parasites, psychics and theurgists did. Centuries after it had begun, the symbiote war was brought to an uneasy standstill. The symbiotes still held some territory, but gained little new ground. Magic had gained a foothold on human consciousness again, one that houses, church, and league soon found hard to control. Covens, underground organizations of psychics, began to operate openly, pursuing agendas in conflict with the powers that be. Individuals seeking power turned to forbidden paths, asking aid of invisible entities whose names were whispered in occult circles. These antinomists risked their souls and those of their fellow humans in their bids for power. Among them were members of the 5 houses who sought imperishable power against their enemies. And all of this leads us to the Emperor Wars. The office of regent could not last forever without some challenge. While individuals had tried short-lived bids for the title of emperor at various times during the Dark Ages, none had come close to succeeding. 50 years after the symbiote wars had calmed, leaving a tense and fearful populace waiting for the next alien expansion, House Hawkwood made its bid for power. Darius Eric Hawkwood made overt offers to the Church and League electors for increased power in return for their votes. This set off a flurry of counter-offers from the other houses, each fighting to gain scepters. Decades of political, military, and social struggles began, a series of conflicts that often threatened the borders of the empire. The houses were not the only forces seeking the imperial throne. The Patriarch, fearful of giving the nobility too much power, moved to gain worlds of his own, pursuing the Church's ancient desire for a theocracy. He was largely unsuccessful, but powerful enough to force certain noble houses in the race to recognize the superiority of the Church. The Merchant League sought a chance for increased power amidst the chaos. Years of war among the nobility have turned the populace against the families. The League sought to use this hatred to kick the royals out. A master diplomat and military tactician, Alexius of House Hawkwood had taken up where Darius, his uncle, had left off. He eventually claimed enough hold on a number of worlds to meet the final challenge. With the grudging backing of the Patriarch, who finally saw which way the wind was blowing, and the hesitant backing of the League Meister, Alexius Hawkwood claimed the imperial throne. A short, quick battle broke out at the Imperial Palace on Byzantium Secundus, but Alexius was prepared. Hidden Hawkwood forces and mercenary fleets moved in and stifled all opposition. The opposing houses were forced to retreat. On that very day, Alexius was crowned Emperor of the known worlds, and no assassin's trick would stop him. At first, only House Hawkwood, the Li Halan, and the Al-Malik conceded, but the Decados and the Hazat both refused to recognize the claim. Years of fighting ensued, this time more vicious than before. The Decados gave in sooner than anyone expected, surprising all and causing people to wonder whether they had seen reason or were plotting some as yet unrevealed scheme. A barbarian border war on the Hazat's borders weakened the family's forces enough so that, following the Decados' recognition of Alexius's claim, the Hazat were also forced to capitulate. It claims that it willingly recognized Alexius in return for his aid in the war, and his recognition of their claim to the barbarian world of Hira. The Emperor Wars were finally at an end, although they had lasted far too long. Almost 2 generations of open conflict had taken its toll on the Empire. Planets had been ravaged and many starships were lost or beyond repair. While the borders remained steady at great cost, the lives of Imperial citizens were the worse for wear. But where there was conflict, there was now stability. An emperor finally sat upon the throne, and what he decreed was writ. All of this resulted in the Pax Alexius. A generation passed in peace. Alexius's job of consolidating power under his rule was nothing short of astonishing. He brought to the empire a stability unknown for centuries. The royal houses, church and league were exhausted by the Emperor Wars. They spent years cementing the territories they had claimed during that universal conflict. Nobody had the will or means for a fresh fight. Their weapons were now intrigue and statecraft. After decades spent consolidating his power, Alexius surprised the known worlds by announcing his wedding to Freya, Eldrid's daughter, a Bulldrock barbarian shield maiden. Her people had spent centuries harrying Alexius's family's holdings, but now the royal nuptials heralded a new era of peace and reconciliation was at hand. In return for the claim over the world of Hargard, Alexius has brought many Bulldrock into the fold of the known worlds under the banner of House Eldred. As soon as the wedding was consummated, Empress Freya announced that she was with child. The citizenry rejoiced, while many of the royal houses gnashed their teeth despite their public smiles. The birth of Princess Aurora brought light to the newest star in the firmament of the known worlds, and her first appearance at the palace of Byzantium Secundus before a gathered throng electrified the known worlds. Even those who hated Alexius found it hard to begrudge this beautiful child. Some even whispered that she was the fulfillment of a heretical prophecy, the reborn sun that would reignite the fading stars. Patriarch Hezekiah blessed from afar the newborn imperial baby. Then he died in his sleep on Holy Terra that very evening. The contentious process of choosing a new patriarch began. The synod was convened on Holy Terra, and factions within the church vied to place their own chosen holy upon the patriarchal throne. In the end, after multiple split votes, Archbishop Palamon of Byzantium Secundus emerged as the voice of the prophet, the holy hierarch, and the patriarch of the Universal Church of the Celestial Sun. Palamon was a cautious ally of Alexius. He understood him better than most in the church, having ministered to him at the cathedral in the imperial city, and he had appreciated some of Alexius's professed reforms. Palamon's election did little to quell a growing schism in the church. Hezekiah had lived a long life, too long, some said. He was rumored to have been using longevity drugs. This hypocrisy angered many, especially among Temple Avesti, and the controversy inflamed a popular anti-technology fervor that had been growing among the populace. Many of the common folk had suffered terribly from the technological horrors unleashed by all sides in the war, as each faction sought advantage over the others. These traumatized survivors decried the privilege of martyrs that allowed the elite to excuse their immoral use of bombs, gas, golems, and orbital bombardments with little heed for their devastating effects on the innocent. This furor is aimed not so much at personal technological devices, but at the manufacture and development of the high-tech weaponry developed during the Emperor Wars. It is not easy to argue for the right to obliterate whole fiefs at the press of a button. Patriarch Palamon, fearing a backlash from the houses and guilds should the peasants' ire get too hot, nonetheless sternly rebuked the war powers for failing to retire much of the technology they had advanced during the wars. His decrees reinforced the long-standing edict whereby old tech and found tech was begrudgingly accepted, but the development and research of high-tech was circumscribed. The Hazats' long fight against the barbarian Kurga Caliphate over ownership of the Hira was finally decided in its favor. The jump route from Hira to Gayam and the rest of the Caliphate had been sealed, cutting off Kurgan forces, leaving those left on Hira to fend for themselves. The Emperor's annexation of Hargard did not end the Buldruk Star Nation's enmity with the known worlds. Many Thanes still resist this incursion, while others seek to profit from it. Before his marriage, Alexius maintained a rather public love triangle between himself, Duchess Salandra de Cados, and Lady Theaphana al-Malik of the Brother Battle Order. Speculation was rife about which one of the two women would become empress. The fact that neither did was a source of shock and sorrow for many. Lady Theaphana had disappeared on Stigmata. After 5 years with no word, she was declared dead and martyred. Following a period of mourning, it was assumed that Duchess Salandra would now cement her place by Alexius' side. It was not to be. Alexius retreated into solitude, and when he finally emerged back into public life with full force, it was with Freya, Eldred's daughter, by his side. Duchess Salandra was publicly supportive with a display of sympathetic pity for her former paramour, but insiders claimed that her rage was unimaginable. Following Lady Theaphana's disappearance, the symbiotes retreated from the front lines on Stigmata, causing many to speculate that her unseen martyrdom delivered a powerful blow against them. They have withdrawn into their territories, although the meaning of this move, uncharacteristic for the chaotic shapeshifters, is hotly debated. And what of the Vaal? Distant and aloof for years, their increased requests for diplomatic visits have continued, although their dialogues are seemingly meaningless, consisting of elaborate discussion of the weather or gardening tips. Some pundits whisper that the enigmatic aliens are sizing the empire up, prepared either for a new expansion or new trade. As a new world is welcomed into the empire, a new generation that has never known universal war comes of age. There are always conflicts and battles, but nothing like the epic scope of the Emperor Wars that ended with Alexius' ascent. Under the Pax Alexius, the common people's destiny again seems assured. The jump routes are open to an unprecedented degree, reuniting worlds long sundered by war and factionalism. Once again, pilgrimages to the stars are taking provincial commoners from their home soil to other planets, following the footsteps of famous holy saints on many worlds as they seek relics, miracles, and redemption. Alexius has maintained his interest in rediscovering the lost worlds and the riches of the Second Republic. His Order of the Phoenix, the Questing Knights, grows in importance as the Empire expands onto Hargard and, surely yet to come, extends deeper into barbarian space. The Order's cohorts, the priests and guild members who aid the Questing Knights, also have an expanded role now that Hargard is open to them. The Church, however, continues to frown on Alexius' emphasis on questing and rediscovery of the past's riches, seeing once again the march of humanity's folly. Despite the years of peace and the birth of Aurora, the stars still slowly die. The fading sun's phenomenon still haunts the lives of known worlders. Many fear that, no matter how many gains were made by Emperor Alexius to unite all sentience into a spiritual commonwealth, the collective sins of humans and aliens continue to tarnish the stars, blocking their light. Whether it is argued that the suns merely reflect light from an Empyrean source, or they generate holy flame themselves, it is widely agreed that they are dimming. Still, there is hope of a sort. Many believe that if the final days should come in their lifetime, then it is their duty to become exemplars of the Prophet's teachings, to be as his disciples, so that when the final radiance occurs, the Pancreator will know that some among his creation stood tall and righteous before the consuming dark. It is no time to retreat, to perform endless penance. The Prophet calls all to move forward, ever forward, to bring light to new stars. And this concludes the review for today. As you can see, this new empire is besieged from many places. It is not as conflictive as the universe depicted in some fiction, like for example Warhammer 40k. Here the real threat is of a more politically subtle nature, but at the same time, there are dangers from without, hostile alien species, and there is the threat of beings from beyond the material plane, so-called demonic entities of unfathomable power. So if you enjoy that aspect in your science fantasy games, there is also that to consider. Well, thanks for watching this part of the review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. In the next part, we are going to take a look at how this society, the politics of this setting is divided. Thanks again, and thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending drive-thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.